So Andy was a real great natural leader, even though he wasn't formally a producer on the show and formerly a writer. He was a tremendous contributor.
Ron Howard has stayed tight-lipped about his time on The Andy Griffith Show, and who could blame him? When you grow up on one of TV's most beloved sets, every fan wants the inside gist. But now, after years of keeping things under wraps, Ron is finally pulling back the curtain on his relationship with Andy Griffith. Was Mayberry as picture-perfect as it seemed? Did Andy embody the charm of Sheriff Taylor off-screen, off-screen, off-screen? Get ready, because Ron's revelations just might surprise you. Andy Griffith and Ron Howard are two names that bring back memories of the small-town charm of The Andy Griffith Show. But their relationship wasn't just about fishing trips and life lessons in Mayberry. Sure, they shared laughs and heartfelt moments on screen, but their bond was complicated behind the scenes. For the first time, Ron Howard spills tea during his time with Andy Griffith. And trust me, it's not all Sunday strolls and father-son talks. What secrets is Ron finally ready to share? And what about those rumors of friction? Ron Howard was the big-name director behind Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind. Ron Howard was just a kid trying to make it in Hollywood, literally. Born on March 1st, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, Ron seemed destined for the spotlight. When your parents are working actors, what else will you do? Start a farm? By the time Ron was 15 months old, he was already on screen in a commercial. Most of us were still figuring out how to walk, and Ron was out there nailing his first gig. When the family moved to Hollywood, his dad, Rance Howard, became his unofficial acting coach. And if that wasn't enough, Ron's parents gave him a front-row seat to live TV productions. With his parents guiding him, Ron's early performances weren't just cute, they were polished. So, what does Ron have to say about his real-life relationship with Andy Griffith? Stick around. This story's about to get even more interesting. Ron Howard didn't just stumble into Hollywood. He practically grew up in it. Imagine being 5 years old and landing your first film role in The Journey, 1959. Most kids that age are just figuring out how to tie their shoes. But Ron? He was already sharing screen time with professionals. Still, it wasn't until he appeared on Playhouse 90 that people realized he was pretty good. Critics praised his performances for having a depth you'd never expect from someone who probably still had to be reminded to eat his vegetables. By 1960, when Ron auditioned for The Andy Griffith Show, he was already turning heads in Hollywood. While his fiery red hair might have initially caught a few casting directors' attention, his raw talent and curiosity about acting sealed the deal. He got multiple callbacks early on because his hair made him stand out. Landing the role of Opie Taylor at 6 years old, Ron became a big name. His on-screen relationship with Andy Griffith was pure magic, but what happened behind the scenes was just as important. Andy took him under his wing, teaching him everything from comedic timing to why character motives matter. It wasn't just acting lessons, but life lessons wrapped in sitcom charm. And then there was that iconic audition moment. For Ron, the set of The Andy Griffith Show wasn't just where he worked, it was where he learned. While most kids were figuring out recess politics, he was soaking up lessons on collaboration and storytelling. And let's be real, how many kids can say they went to work every day and got life advice from Andy Griffith? Andy Griffith's story started in the small town of Mount Airy, North Carolina, aka the blueprint for Mayberry. Born on June 1st, 1926, Andy didn't exactly have a silver spoon in his mouth. Growing up during the Great Depression meant humble beginnings, but his parents somehow scraped together enough to buy him an old trombone. Initially, Andy dreamed of becoming a music teacher, but life had other plans, and his quick wit and talent for storytelling landed him gigs performing in nightclubs. His big break was a hilarious monologue about football, what it was football, that went viral before it was even a thing. Over 800,000 copies sold, proof that a good laugh can take you far. That unexpected hit catapulted Andy into the entertainment world, where his down-to-earth charm and humility became his trademark. Off-screen, 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 Andy wasn't just a co-star to young Ron Howard, Opie. Andy had a thing for making things relatable, often sprinkling in a story or two to drive the point home. Ron later admitted that Andy's wisdom shaped him both professionally and personally. They stayed close even after the show wrapped, with Ron often calling Andy for advice. It's safe to say Andy wasn't just a TV legend. He was the kind of mentor you'd wish for, equal parts wise and approachable, with just enough charm to keep things light. In a heartwarming gesture, Andy Griffith gifted Ron Howard a signed guitar as a token of their friendship, a gift Ron still treasures. Built on mutual respect, their bond is one of Hollywood's finest examples of a mentor-mentee relationship. The Andy Griffith Show, aired in 1960, quickly became a classic for portraying small-town life and timeless values. Over its 8th season run, it consistently ranked among the top-rated programs on television. Andy Griffith's Sheriff Taylor embodied compassion and wisdom, while Ron Howard's Opie symbolized innocence and curiosity. Together, they created a touching father-son dynamic. Behind the scenes, the cast and crew fostered a warm, family-like atmosphere, contributing to the show's feel-good tone. Did you know the show's iconic whistling theme, The Fishin' Hole, is one of the most recognizable TV tunes ever? While the show cemented Andy Griffith as a television legend, it also launched Ron Howard's career, providing him with a solid foundation for his future stardom. Transitioning from a cherished childhood role to adulthood is never easy, but Ron Howard managed it with remarkable grace. When the Andy Griffith Show wrapped up, things felt different. It wasn't just another season wrap-up. This was the end of an era. Andy Griffith stood at the microphone, starting to speak, and suddenly, it hit him. The tears came. He was crying, not just a few tears, he was sobbing. It wasn't just about leaving a job behind. It was going a family, a way of life. He realized that the show had been more than just a gig. It was a huge part of his life. And now, with it all ending, he wasn't sure what life would be like without those familiar faces and that comforting routine. But looking back, it wasn't just the show that had defined his childhood. It was the way his dad had turned an unexpected turn of events into something even bigger. His dad had come to California hoping to finally fulfill a dream on hold because of the Korean War. But his big break didn't go for him. It came for his little boy. And that twist of fate made his dad an acting coach, teaching him in a way only a parent could. It wasn't your typical acting class. His dad broke down the craft in a way a little kid could understand, something simple but powerful. Even at 4 or 5, he was learning the basics of Stanislavski but simplified. His dad would take a scene, like Opie trying to avoid his homework, and break it down, explaining the emotions behind the lines. See, Opie doesn't want to do his homework, and his dad wants him to. He's just trying to get out of it. His dad would guide him, showing him the layers of the character in a simple way for a child to understand. And if there were ever a scene where Opie was getting away with something, he would quickly remind him, "That's TV, not real life. Don't try it at home." But his dad wasn't just an acting coach. He had this rare gift. He wasn't intimidated by anyone, no matter how powerful they were. He worked with legends like Andy Griffith, Don Knotts, Aaron Rubin, and Sheldon Leonard. But even with all these big names, his dad would raise his hand and say, "Hold up, I don't think this is working. Opie's coming across as too bratty. Instead of cheap laughs, let's make their relationship more honest." And the crazy part was that they listened. Andy and Sheldon, they heard him out and agreed. That shift, that decision to make Opie's relationship with his dad more real, ended up being a game changer for the show. Fast forward to the final days of shooting. He was 14, and the wrap party was unlike anything before. The show was still #1, but Andy Griffith was ready to move on. And honestly, he was okay with it. He had other interests, sports, directing, and returning to school. But when the final day of shooting came, it felt like a punch to the gut. At the party, Andy took the mic, and just like that, the tears started flowing. It wasn't just a show ending. It was a chapter of his life closing that he didn't fully realize he'd miss until that moment. He was saying goodbye to people who had become family, to a way of life that had shaped so much of who he was. And it stung. Nearly 20 years later, they brought the show back for a reunion movie. By then, he had moved on. He was directing and had even left Happy Days behind. Life was different, but Andy asked him to return and reprise his role as Opie. Of course, he agreed. And when he did, he was reminded that the people he had worked with back then, those same wonderful people, were just as he remembered. The childhood memories were untouched, the connection as strong as ever. It was like no time had passed at all. Moving on, Ron Howard wasn't content just riding the Opie Taylor wave forever. He jumped into other roles, like his standout gig in George Lucas's American Graffiti, 1973. The movie's success screamed loud and clear. Ron wasn't just that kid from Mayberry anymore. At the same time, he hit the books at USC's School of Cinematic Arts, eager to learn the ins and outs of filmmaking. Determined to ditch the child star label, Ron dove into directing with Grand Theft Auto, 1977. Not the video game, it was a wild, low-budget movie produced by Roger Corman, the king of making magic on a shoestring budget. And then came the big hitters, Splash, 1984, the rom-com with a mermaid that made us all believe in love and sea creatures, and Cocoon, 1985, the heartwarming sci-fi tale about aging gracefully, or not. These hits didn't just make Ron a household name as a filmmaker. They showed that reinvention is not just possible in Hollywood, it's necessary. Ron traded in his small-town charm for big-screen brilliance. Honestly, we're all the better. In 1975, Ron Howard tied the knot with Cheryl Alley, and against all Hollywood odds, they're still going strong nearly 50 years later. In an industry where marriages can last as long as a movie's runtime, Ron and Cheryl have been the exception. A gifted writer, Cheryl became his rock, helping him navigate the wild ride of the entertainment business. And let's face it, Hollywood is no picnic. Together, they built a close-knit family that includes Bryce Dallas Howard, now a well-known actress and filmmaker. The Howards have always kept their feet on the ground, even when the red carpets rolled out. Ron credits his career success to Cheryl's unwavering support, and he's often said that being a dad has shaped his storytelling. This family isn't just close. They work together, hit red carpets, and probably have the world's most interesting group texts. If anyone wants proof that love can survive Hollywood, Ron and Cheryl's marriage is it. Meanwhile, Andy Griffith wasn't done dazzling audiences after his days in Mayberry. He took on the role of a sharp yet folksy lawyer in Matlock, proving that Southern charm and a sharp suit never go out of style. Viewers loved him all over again, and the show became another hit. But Andy didn't stop there. He also tapped into his musical roots, releasing country and gospel albums inspired by his Southern upbringing. Even with all these achievements, Andy always remembered his Mayberry days as the highlight of his career. And he stayed close to his castmates, especially Ron Howard, whom he lovingly called his son in spirit. Andy spent his later years juggling his career and personal life like a pro, ensuring his legacy as one of America's most cherished entertainers stayed intact. As for Ron Howard, leaving Mayberry led him straight to Milwaukee in the 1950s, or at least the sitcom version. When Happy Days hit TV screens in 1974, Ron became Richie Cunningham, the clean-cut kid everyone wanted as a best friend. The show was a smash hit, giving the world catchphrases, leather jackets, and Fonzie, the coolest mechanic ever. While fans couldn't get enough of Richie, Ron had bigger plans. He spent his downtime on set soaking up everything about directing, and even tried his hand at it with a few episodes. For Ron, Happy Days wasn't just about acting. It was his launchpad into a filmmaking career that would later define him. Andy Griffith wasn't just the lovable sheriff of Mayberry. He was also a mentor who took his role as a guide seriously, even off-screen. Andy wasn't the type to clock out when the camera stopped rolling. He continued to steer young Ron Howard with nuggets of wisdom, always delivered with that sincere, down-to-earth charm. The two stayed close long after the Andy Griffith Show ended, often catching up over quiet chats or family hangouts. Andy didn't just cheer on Ron's dreams of becoming a director. He assured him that cracking Hollywood was just like fishing. It required patience, effort, and maybe a little luck. Ron took Andy's advice to heart because his directorial career kicked off with a bang, or rather a splash. Splash, the whimsical romantic comedy about a mermaid falling for Tom Hanks, was a surprise hit in 1984. Audiences and critics loved it, and apparently everyone was okay with suspending their disbelief about a fishwoman romance. It was the kind of movie with just the right mix of heart, humor, and wait. Is this happening? Moments. After that, Ron kept the hits coming with Cocoon in 1985, a film about aging, life, and oddly enough, aliens. Now to Andy Griffith, the man behind the scenes. While his TV persona was warm and chatty, Andy was more reserved. He valued his privacy and wasn't one to spill his life story to the press. But those who knew him, like Ron, described him as a guy with a wicked sense of humor, impeccable manners, and rock-solid morals. Andy also had a deep love for music. When he wasn't dishing out life advice, he could often be found strumming his guitar or singing gospel songs. His small-town North Carolina upbringing shaped him, and he never let fame turn him into someone he wasn't. Ron often credited Andy's humility and work ethic for shaping his approach to life and work. Between the life lessons and the guitar playing, Andy Griffith might have been the world's coolest mentor. Andy Griffith was down to earth and reflective, making him a hit with everyone who knew him. That same quality rubbed off on Ron Howard, who's become one of Hollywood's most respected filmmakers. Take Apollo 13, 1995, for example. If you're into edge-of-your-seat suspense and a bit of NASA drama, this movie is your jam. It's the true story of a space mission that went wrong, and Ron turned it into a nail-biting spectacle. The movie got 9 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture. Then there's A Beautiful Mind, 2001, which explored the messy brilliance of mental illness. Not only did it rake in awards, but it also earned Ron his first Oscars for Best Director and Best Picture. It's like the guy has a cheat code for telling human stories on a massive scale. Andy Griffith sure didn't have an easy ride in his later years. He faced some serious health battles, including a heart attack and Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a rare condition that messes with your nervous system. But here's the thing. Andy didn't let that slow him down. He kept doing what he loved, sticking with his entertainment career and staying in touch with his fans. He often talked about how his passion for storytelling and work kept him going, even when things got tough. His grit didn't just impress the fans. It blew away people like Ron Howard, who looked up to Andy for his ability to stay positive despite his health setbacks. You know, it's said that Andy's relentless spirit helped him recover from a major heart attack back in the 1980s faster than anyone expected. And even though Guillain-Barré syndrome left him temporarily unable to walk, he was still out there, giving talks and making appearances. Andy was the mentor who could hype you up better than any motivational speaker. He'd look at Ron and tell him how proud he was of the man and filmmaker he'd become. And Ron? He held back all his feelings as he thanked Andy for everything, from career advice to being a solid friend. Honestly, who wouldn't want Andy Griffith in their corner? The man probably made you feel like you could conquer the world with nothing but a smile and a fishing pole. For Ron, these moments weren't just touching. They were bittersweet. Andy wasn't just a co-star. He was like that wise uncle who always knew what to say. Their last meetings were quiet, full of that unspoken bond you only get with someone who gets you. Ron still treasures Andy's final words, clinging to them like an heirloom, but thankfully, without the panic of, what if I lose this? Looking at their friendship, they left an unshakable legacy as Aunt Bee's pie recipes on TV history. Their real-life bond brought something special to the Andy Griffith Show. Fans weren't just watching Sheriff Taylor and Opie, they were watching two people who genuinely cared for each other. That father-son dynamic? It set the gold standard for wholesome family vibes, warmth, respect, and communication so good it'd make a family therapist proud. And even till now, the magic hasn't faded. Ron hasn't let Andy's memory fade either. He's the guy who casually drops Andy anecdotes into interviews like he's reminiscing over coffee. He credits his Hollywood success to the values Andy taught him, like respect, kindness, and keeping cool under pressure. As a director, Ron kept Andy's spirit alive on his sets. No diva drama, just a collaborative, respectful vibe where even the crew feels like family. It's the kind of leadership Andy would have approved of, and it keeps his legacy thriving in every film Ron touches.